about how to launch our kids, and you're going to hear my bias about uh, the importance of loving our kids out of the house rather than kicking them out, booting them out. And I think there are ways that we can do that that are firm and loving, but not necessarily harsh. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through this. So here's the model. The left side of this are practices that I think parents need to strengthen and undertake to set the stage for letting go of the young adult. And it starts with, and that's on the left side as you're looking at this. On the right side are the behaviors that the young adult should be developing and demonstrating: letting go, independence, forgiveness, apology, love, and understanding. And when there's a healthy separation, I call it a kind of disconnected, separate connectedness, then you have you have the young adult and you have the parents, but you have this communication. There's an amiable, affiliative type of relationship between the parent and the young adult. My belief is that a young adult is not fully differentiated or independent unless they are emotionally connected to their parents in some way, positively and emotionally connected to their parents. So I'll explain that a little bit more as we go through it. So the practices that are important are the two foundational ones are understanding the young adult and understanding the process here and what's important from a parental standpoint, and then unconditional love. So these are kind of foundational. If we don't build a relationship and understanding and connection with our young adult, it's going to be hard to launch them. Likewise, if we don't demonstrate and express our unconditional love for them, they're not going to feel the security to move out of the house or out into the world in a successful way. The next two I call healing practices, and these have to do with where there are unresolved issues or damage in the relationship, and the parents need to be able to exhibit these practices to address problems that exist that will impede the process of separation. And then the last two are the launching practices. Supportive integrity is about bringing love forward with backbone and being able to create a sense of firmness so a young adult bumps up against a firm sense of the parent, which helps them define who they are. And then ultimately we get to the place of letting go, which really is something of a grieving process. And I think a lot of us as parents don't recognize that every stage of our letting go of our kids, there's a level of sadness and grief about that. And sometimes we hang on because we don't want to have to deal with or face that grieving process. So a point I would like to make about this is circular. So it's not like a 12-step program where you automatically are finished once you hit the 12th step, where you go back to step one. Any one of these practices may be needed at any one point in time, depending on how things are going in the relationship with the young adult. We may need to emphasize one more than the other. When things don't go well, we end up with this type of situation. One in which the young adult and the parent are positively enmeshed. That is, this is the kind of helicopter parent and the young adult who can't make a decision without being sure that the parent is okay with it. It's a very dependent relationship. The one to the right is the negatively enmeshed. And this is one in which there's a contentious relationship between the parent and the young adult. And there's a strain and a contentious quality to that. And the bottom one is what we sometimes refer to as an alienated a place of alienation. This is where the young adult may be living on his or her own, maybe married, maybe with kids, but there's no communication with the parents. It's a total cutoff. Now, people would say, well, that person must be an independent adult. Then, not in my opinion. If they're not talking to the parents, they are not emotionally separated from their parents, emotionally in a healthy way, separated from their parents. Hope that makes sense. Those are some of the different possible failures to launch, if you want to call them that. Let's talk about understanding first. So there's some things, I start with some assumptions that parents need to make to be able to position themselves to launch young adults. And let's kind of start with those. The first one is we cannot control our young adults. I mean, that's one of the adjustments that I think a parent has to make, that they are young adults. One parent said, problem with young adults is they're just that, adults. We can't control them. We can't tell them what to do. Secondly, we're not responsible for their decisions, actions, and success in life. And that's a hard one because we grow up as parents feeling like we're fully responsible for these kids. You know, now at an age of 2 or 3, I think that's true. When you have an 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 25, 35, 40-year-old, we're not responsible for them at that point. But I think that's somewhat wired into us, this desire to try to get them to do something, and our feelings that we're somehow responsible for fixing their problems. What we are responsible for are our decisions, actions, and feelings. So a lot of what I focus on is what can the parent do? I mean, ultimately, that's the only person you can change. It's not you can't change the young adult. Another assumption that's important is we won't use the past to excuse their actions or ours. A lot of times parents will kind of allow certain things to happen, allow young adults to not face certain consequences because, oh, they had a tough childhood or their issues. So we can't excuse them for the past, nor can we excuse ourselves either. So we need to balance love and letting go. So that's one of my core pieces that I've written is about love and backbone. And to me, that's probably the critical dynamic of parents and young adults. Starts in the adolescent period, but adolescent and young adult period is how do we balance our love and support for them along with saying no and putting down limits and boundaries. You know, I need to understand that relationships are inherently reciprocal. This is the old, concept that basically an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You treat me a certain way, you're likely to get that treatment back. So we can control how we treat our young adults, and that will influence how they respond to us. And then believe and accept that change must start with us. And that can be kind of a hard one because, you've got young adults who are irresponsible or acting out, and our tendency may be to think, well, they should make changes. They should start first. They need to step up and make some changes. But we can't affect them, but we can make change from our end. So will our actions make a difference? For you as a parent, absolutely. Because what I talk about and do with parents helps parents sleep better at night and feel better about themselves as parents. I think parents are the most guilt-ridden segment of our society. We all feel like we did something wrong, or it's all our fault if things are not turning out right with our kids. Will it make a difference for your son or daughter? Well, it depends. Your ability to engage them in love, to have that fundamental connection with them, your ability to consistently follow the practices of the workshop, and their receptivity. I mean, fact of the matter is they have the trump card. We could do all the right things as parents. And I have parents that are just great parents, and the kids are just kind of hell raisers and all having all kinds of problems. So if they don't want to change, all we can do is to take the high road and do the best we can as parents. So another way to think of it, so we're thinking about, okay, assumptions we have to make. This is another lens that I'd like you to think about. When you think about your young adult, they have huge developmental tasks that they're trying to accomplish. Establish a sense of their identity, develop independence, financial and emotional independence, intimacy, build close relationships and a special relationship with one person, and intention, a sense of purpose, direction, and passion in life. So I would argue that anything you see happening with your young adult can be seen through one or more of these lenses. They're trying to figure out their identity. They're trying to act out to establish their independence. They're in trouble around their relationships, or they have no sense of purpose or direction in their life. And happiness. Now, parents say, well, they take drugs that makes them happy. Well, I would argue that my young adult is terribly depressed, and that's the problem. I'd argue that underneath those types of problems, mental health problems, and substance abuse problems, is a failure at one or more of these tasks. And so it's not just about dealing with depression or substance abuse. How do you help the young adult, move forward with these particular developmental tasks? The sandwich. So this generation, and I'm speaking millennials, although I'll have to tell you, I think the Gen Zs, or Zoomers, as some people call them, and you may have a Zoomer as well as a millennial or even a Gen Xer. I think they're fairly similar. I don't think the Gen Zs are going to be a lot different than the millennials. And one of the things about the millennials is there's been a kind of criticism of them as being entitled, and I thought I raised a very unentitled child until I sent her off to college. It was time for her to leave, and believe me, it was time for us to have her leave. It was not good at home, a lot of arguments, a lot of stuff. So she goes off to college, and initially she wanted to go to New York City for acting, and I said, no, that's not in my list of acceptable colleges. And so she ended up going quite far away, about 5 miles down the road to Bethel University. And one night she called about 7 o'clock, and she said, Dad, what's happening? And she said, well, I didn't get down to the dining room in time. And so I didn't get anything to eat. Can you bring a sandwich over to me? Well, after I kind of pulled myself off the floor from laughing convulsively, I said, what planet are you living on? I'm not going to bring you a sandwich. Well, you're not bringing something? No, I'm not going to do that. So anyway, so that was pretty much the end of the conversation. Two things came out of that. She never called me again for a sandwich. But the other thing that was striking to me was that the assumption she could call me and that I might be receptive to running a sandwich over to Bethel for her. I just couldn't believe it. How did that happen? But I guess that was, so I think that's a little bit of some of this generation. Although if you look at the research, self-absorption, kind of narcissism, selfishness, that's kind of a characteristic of that period of life. It's not unique to millennials or now the Gen Zs. Here's some things. Some of this is kind of old. I started collecting some of these statistics in about 4 or 5 years ago, but they like free time. They want creative jobs. They like self-expression. They want to travel, work ethic. They're digital natives, unlike me. I'm a digital immigrant. And they're least overtly religious. On the other side, there's some positive things. They're close to their parents, maybe too close. Over 52% are living at home right now in the US. Now, partly that's COVID and the economy and stuff, but it's been a fairly high rate for some time, even before COVID. They talk to their parents more and ask for advice, feel responsible for family members. When asked about their taking care of their elderly parents, I think it was 60 or 70% of millennials said that they thought it was their responsibility to take care of their elderly parents. That's the good news. We'll have somebody to take care of us. When boomers were asked the same question, 25% said it was their responsibility to take care of elderly parents. So I think the closeness of the relationship that we built with our young adults, our kids and our young adults is a part of that factor. They marry later in life. First marriage for males is 29, females is 27. That's a good thing, right? They get to figure out who they are and what they want to do in life, and then they find a partner rather than make their partner who they are and what they want to do in life. So how do, we can't just relate to our kids through statistics. How do we know what they think and they value? So we got to learn to talk to them. Learn to ask, listen, stop telling, listen with the heart, hear what they're saying emotionally, stay hopeful. I think I would say the majority of parents that I work with are struggling with young adults. The young adults turn out all right. They're taking a lot longer to turn out all right these days. But part of my message to young adults is try to be patient. This too shall pass. There will be progress. All right, let's talk about unconditional love. When I was at Wilder Child Guidance Clinic quite a number of years ago, at lunch, a colleague of mine, Diane Dovenberg, told me about a session she had where she was sitting with a father and a son. Son had been acting out, drugs, delinquency issues. Father was quite mad at him. And at one point, the son looked at the father and said, "Dad, would you cry if I died?" And this big burly, I think he may have been a truck driver, some burly kind of guy looked at him and said, "There are not enough buckets in the world to hold the tears I'd cry for you." There are not enough buckets in the world to hold the tears that I'd cry for you. That's a message every one of us has to get across to our kids. So I challenge you, have you told your kids that there are not enough buckets in the world to hold the tears that you'd cry for them if something happened to them? I mean, think about how mad we may get at our kids, but it's the worst thing that could happen to a parent, to lose a child. And maybe some of you have, but it's a horrible thing. What does expressing this unconditional love do for kids? Affirms their existence, part of our covenant with them, creates security. They have this feeling that no matter what's happening in my life and no matter how down I get, my parents love me. I know that I always have that. Doesn't mean I can always come home. And I'm not saying that there's a little different message there, but you will always be loved. It'll always be there for you. It's the antidote to shame. Kids may feel because of actions and things that they've done, a lot of shame, they shouldn't exist. But if they know they're loved, they know they should exist. And it frees the young adult to experiment, because if they fail, they know they have the love of the parents behind them. Statements you can make to your child: "I love you unconditionally, you matter so much." These are some of the statements. I'm big on letter writing, and I've written letters to all my kids. Usually a combination of apologizing for some things that I feel like I should have done or didn't do. And then I tell them that, nothing can separate them from my love. Nothing they could do would ever affect, um, reduce my love for them as my son or as my daughter. And I'd like to read it to them and then give that to them. And it just stamps in that sense of love that has to get into a very deep level for our young adults. Okay. Seemed to me I might have skipped one. Let me get back. So, just this is a caveat, unconditional approval of behaviors. Just unconditional love is not unconditional approval of behavior. Giving into demands, it's not earned, it's not something blind, not dependent on your feelings, it's steady, not used to control, guilt, or threaten. So again, understanding, relating, listening, communicating, connecting to our kids, and letting our kids know that they're loved is this foundation for their being able to leave the family in a healthy way. So next is apology. So we're starting to talk about the healing practices here. So these are some of the problems that I think the apology can address. Positively enmeshed, apologizing for being too involved, too overbearing, too much of a helicopter parent, and being willing to act and step back and give your child the space they need to make their own decisions. Apologizing in a negatively enmeshed situation where they're angry at you for something that's happened in the past. If you're aware of that, I think we as parents need to change first, take the high road, and be willing to apologize for something that could help heal that relationship. Same thing for being disconnected. I've got a couple parents whose young adults have gone off the radar. I mean, they will not talk to them, will not communicate with them, don't even want the parents to know where they are. One is married and one is younger and a male. And it's just heartbreaking to the parents. That's this alienation. That's one of the toughest situations that I deal with. And again, you can't force your young adult to have a relationship with you. Why apologize? Awareness, honesty, vulnerability. You're showing some vulnerability. If you want your young adult to be vulnerable, you have to do that yourself. Take away any doubt that it was your son or daughter's fault. Something happened in the past, and for instance, abuse, or you physically hit the person or hit the child, and that's kind of sitting there in your mind or your consciousness, and you need to take responsibilities for that. The impact on parent failing to apologize, the reactivity and defensiveness of the young adult, distance and avoidance, unhappiness. These are some of the characteristics that can be exhibited in a situation where the parent has not stepped forward and stepped up and been willing to apologize. What holds parents back? We don't like to be vulnerable. Our parents never apologized or forgave. I had a strained relationship with my father growing up. It led me to the dissertation that I did in graduate school. And he never did apologize for anything. I just crossed my arms like this picture of this guy here. Maybe I'm mimicking him. But he finally, in my later young adult years, we had a reconciliation, and I was able to forgive my dad on that count. He grew up on a farm. I'm sure his father never apologized to him. That was kind of an old school sign of weakness if you apologize to your kids. All right. Quickly what to do and not to do and apologize. We've seen horrible examples of apology in the public sector, Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Well, you didn't, uh, it won't happen again. Um, I'm sorry that this happened, but of course, you did this. It's really, I find it's very hard to say I'm sorry without the but word. I mean, you can, if you're willing to write a letter or apologize to your son or daughter for something that's happened, work hard to not use the but word, even though maybe things they've done, you could argue triggered your reaction. Don't do that. Apology just takes responsibility for our behavior. All right, forgiveness. And apology and forgiveness are very much, different sides of the same coin. Um, and they both are really gifts to ourselves. When we apologize, we offload this guilt and the shame, and we're able to kind of let go of that. And when we forgive, we forgive in a way that really is a gift to ourselves. Um, that's widely described as something that when we forgive, we are really giving a gift to ourselves, because we hold on to resentment and anger, and that is what uh, is let go, and we're able to forgive somebody. A gift we give our kids, an acknowledgement of our imperfection, again, a kind of a willingness to be vulnerable, a choice, a release of resentment, the antidote to resentment, and it changes the way we relate to our kids. Our ability to forgive and apologize, whether the kids change or not, young adults change or not. And I'll argue that you can't undertake these things with a alternative or ulterior motive. Well, I'm going to do this because I hope then that he admits that he was wrong or did something that he shouldn't have done. We can't do it like that. We have to do it freely and without an expectation that there will be something coming back from that. So even in apologizing, if our young adult doesn't forgive us, that we're doing the right thing. At the end of the day, we have to do the right thing. How will you know you're forgiven? Express it without buts. However, accept. So we don't do the I forgive you, but we remember the offense without anger or resentment. Sometimes I have parents write letters of forgiveness. Sometimes the parents are so angry at the young adult, and they have to write a letter of the anger, and then conclude that letter with forgiveness. And then I have them shred that letter in my office and let it go, and say, if you get mad or get thinking about something that your son or daughter has done in the past, it's like pulling those little shreds out and trying to stick them back together. Don't do it. So anyway, it changes our approach to our kids. Our heart changes in a sense in how we relate to our kids. And I mentioned earlier that I think parents are the guiltiest segment of our society. A lot of times forgiveness needs to be about ourselves. That so many parents carry around, oh, you know, little Johnny got away in the shopping center. I couldn't find him. Or this happened early on. I had an accident. It's my fault that he's this way now. And we need to be able to forgive ourselves. Or even it's things like I wasn't there enough for my child. I was too busy with work. Or I was too indulgent. We need to forgive ourselves from that as well. All right. Supportive integrity. And this is one that I'm going to focus on a little bit more in 2 weeks, because this is about how to deal with the tougher situations with our young adults and still maintain this kind of loving connection with them. So this is where we have to kind of look at dealing with acting out, with drug issues, with animosity, contentious relationships with our young adults. So I think so love and backbone is love and being willing to say no, being willing to have boundaries and set clear expectations. So it really ends up, I think it's important for us to understand as parents that no is not a 4-letter word. And we have no problem saying no to our toddler to go out on the street and play in the street at 2 years old. I don't think we had any hesitation about that not being a loving act. However, when our young adult maybe heads to the car to drive away and they've been drinking or they're high, oh, I don't want to say no to them at that point. Or, and yet to me, it's the same situation. And maybe the best thing to do is call the police and have them pulled over. So, when kids are told no, it forces them to be stronger. They have to step up themselves. It challenges them to step up. And it causes them to tap into their capability more, their deeper reserve, their resilience. And we send a message that you can do it. No, I'm not going to do that for you. I'm not going to give you money, or I'm not going to drive you there. You want to go, buy cigarettes or do something, and I'm not going to drive you there. It's not something I'm willing to do. I'm not going to buy you a new car. Whatever it might be, it forces them to have to deal with kind of the reality of life. One of my mentors when I was at Wisconsin, a guy named Frank Farley, said that in kind of traditional families, mothers teach kids about unconditional love, and fathers teach kids about conditional love. Basically, there's no free lunch in the world. The world is conditional. So if we don't teach them about the conditional aspects of the world at home, they're going to learn it the hard way when they leave. Now, I'd argue parents need to do both. And parents can get into trouble when, and a fairly common occurrence, one parent becomes the good cop and the other parent becomes the bad cop. One is always kind of loving and supportive and trying to nurturing, and the other sees that as being too soft on the young adult. So that other parent, and a lot of times it's the father becomes the harder person to take the harder stance, although I've seen it both ways. Feels like he has to offset his wife's coddling, because they're coddling that kid and I got to come down harder on him. So obviously there's a split there between the two parents, and it's a great way for the adolescent or young adult to play that out, to play one against the other. If the young adult wants to do something, who's he going to go to? So, and then of course it creates this tremendous strain in the relationship as well. All right, I talked a little bit about, I mentioned my kind of my dissertation, and my dissertation was based on the work of a person named Lorna Benjamin, who defined healthy adult parenting and letting go behaviors as those in this upper left-hand area, such as encouraging separate identity. You can do fine, you do it fine. Carefully, fairly consider, friendly, listen, show empathetic understanding, confirm as okay, stroke, smooth, calm, warmly welcome. Those are the characteristics of parents that in my study that did a good job of letting go of their adolescent. And the adolescent's behavior then was this way. They had their own standards, they put their cards on the table, they asserted themselves, They were open in disclosing, clearly expressed, enthusiastic showing, relaxed flow, joyful approach. They're positive. It's that combination that we're after us, but what we can control is this whole section up here, the parent behaviors on the top left. What I found was that parents who were successful in letting go of their young adults had a high level of love and a high level of letting go at the same time. And I looked at delinquent parents of delinquents. They had a high level of letting go, but a low level of love. And so you had a lot of that negative enmeshment thing going on. This is fairly complicated, and I tried to explain it in a little more depth in this second book that I had, Love to Let Go. So I go into a little bit more explanation of that, but it's partly to try to reinforce the concept that we have to love our kids to let them go. And then if we harbor a lot of anger and animosity to them, that keeps us and them stuck, and the letting go process doesn't proceed. So I hope that that's clear. So love and backbone criteria. So am I balancing love and backbone? Here's some questions to ask. Is my decision motivated by love, or is it driven by anxiety, fear, anger, frustration, those kinds of behaviors? So when you're making a decision or taking an action toward your young adult, ask yourself, what's motivating this? Is it coming out of my love for this young adult, or is it driven by other emotions? Is my decision consistent with my principles? Honesty, responsibility, keeping promises, facing consequences. So that's the second criteria. That's more of the, okay, I have values, I have principles. And finally, is my decision likely to foster greater dependence or independence? So if I do this for them, are they more likely to want me to do this all the time, or to see this as something that I'm saying they can't do something themselves, I have to do it for them? So if you want a kind of a criteria for whether you're acting in a balance in terms of love and backbone, this is a good kind of checklist. Some rules to guide your decisions. Don't do something for your young adult that they can do for themselves. If you're going to provide some tangible support, require them to meet you halfway. Do a matching grant. I'll put some money up, you get some money. If you're gonna buy a car, I'll match you, but I'm not just gonna give you the money. If you're going to provide some support, require them to first deliver on the expectation. I think parents sometimes fail because they try to bribe the person into doing something. A bribe is giving them money and then with the promise that they're going to do it. And then when they don't do it, there's no consequence. Now, if you say, well, I'll meet you halfway, or after you do this, I'll give you the money. You make so much money, then I'll put some money into it. That's a more of a reinforcement situation. Partner with them in finding solutions versus focusing on the problem. Certain amount of my training is on kind of solution-focused approaches to helping individuals and couples. And it has to do with shifting from focusing on the problem to say, let's brainstorm solutions to this problem. And in doing so, you become partners in finding solutions. I'll mention one thing that I do. There's a blog about this on the website. I like to approach parents and young adults, particularly if I can get the young adult to come in with a parent in a family therapy session. And usually when parents and young adults come in, they're kind of preparing for battle. The parents are wanting me to somehow fix the young adult or tell them what they need to do. and the young adult is already prepared to fight me and the parents if he or she has to. And I try to say, let's start with a question to the young adult. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? And I have a whiteboard in my office, and they go up, well, you're going to be living at home. I've never had anybody say I want to be just living with mommy and daddy, 5 years from now. That doesn't happen. And that's always a relief to the parents when they put up there, I'm going to be living in an apartment. I'm going to California maybe, or something like that. Most of them say they're going to stay in the Twin Cities. What are you going to be doing? Well, I'm going to get a job in such an area, or I'm going to be in school. And then you just go down the list. And now you have the young adult and the two parents pointing in the same direction. Okay, this is where you want to go. And I've never had parents, I've had parents maybe be a little disappointed. Oh, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more. But none of these young adults have said, I just want to live in a box under the bridge. They all want to have a job. They want to, you have a girlfriend or boyfriend. They want to be living on their own. They want to have a car and stuff. So for the most part, parents are relieved when they see that on the board. And I usually say, are you okay with that? Yeah, that's okay. Then I ask the young adult, what are 2 things you need to do in the next year to help you get toward that 5-year goal? And then they say, well, I'm going to do this and that. And I say, what are 2 things that you would like your parents to do to help support you get to that 5-year goal? And they say, well, I might need some help here. I might need some money. So they all leave with a 5-year plan, and now they're working together rather than this kind of clashing with each other over, you're watching too much video, you're playing too many video games, you're staying up too late, and all those issues. We may get to those at some point, but I try to get us all on the same page, moving in the same direction. Yeah, pick your battles. Try not to get into, power struggles with things that are not important. If you got to dig in, then save it for sort of critical things that you really need to dig in for. So, all right, last practice here is letting go. And this one is a book that I wrote. Yeah, it's called Growing Apart, Letting Go of Our Young Adults. So this is really more for now they've started to live on their own. Maybe they're married, they've got kids. It's now time for us as parents to really move forward on our own and to really let go of these young adults. So this is I think a good book if you're kind of at that stage. And parents need to separate as much as the young adult needs to separate. For the parents, characteristics of separating include exhibiting autonomy, detaching from the need to help, fix, rescue, continue to love and care, stay emotionally connected, focus on what's important in the young adult's life or in their couple's life, as opposed to what you might think is important. And invest in adult friendship. Try to treat your young adult as an adult friend. You're always going to be their parent, but you can be a friend to them as well, and certainly treat them in a way that you treat a friend. So, and their developmental tasks of midlife parents. Remember we talked about identity and independence and intimacy and intention. Well, for parents at the moving into the empty nest stage, these are some of the tasks that need to be accomplished. More independence. The kids are not right there in the house. You get to rearrange things. You get to downsize possibly. I've had a few parents downsize to be able to say to their young adult, we don't have room for you anymore. I guess that's one way to get your kid to move out of the house. You get a smaller house. So widening the family circle, that's part of the experience because your son or daughter may be getting married and may have grandchildren, reconciling conflicting loyalties and lifestyles. You know, our kids, I have 3 young adult kids, their lifestyle and some of the decisions they make, my wife and I go, oh, it's not what we would do, but we got to let go of them and let them make their own decisions and make their own mistakes. So developing an adult relationship, grieving the loss of the family unit. That's, and that's kind of hard to do. All once your holidays become enlarged. There's somebody else sitting on Christmas morning. And I remember my daughter got engaged and had invited her fiance over for Christmas morning. We opened gifts and presents. And I think my son was a little bothered. Do we have to have him over? Because it was kind of the end of our own little family gathering that we had done for all these years. So we've never let him come over since. No, that's not true. We've opened our family to our daughter's husbands and our son's daughter too. So, but it's a kind of a grieving. It's a change. It's a transition, and revising the marriage relationship without the child focus. There's some perception that empty nest period is a period where there's a higher rate of divorce. And I think that there's some argument for that because parents may have been staying together in a way that was focused very much on raising their kids and being partners. And then when the kids leave, there's nothing left. They hadn't really worked on the relationship to build their own relationship or their closeness or grow their marriage. So you can see, so in some ways it's a resetting of the marriage that needs to take place. I talk about kind of empty nest syndrome and midlife crisis and sandwich generation. So while we're trying to let go of our young adults, we may be dealing with midlife crisis. And I think I've seen some men and women dealing with midlife crisis that were similar to what their young adult was dealing with. Identity, is this, who am I? What do I really want to do with the rest of my life? Some of those same questions that their young adult may be dealing with. And the sandwich generation dealing with, I've got a club sandwich, I think, because I got grandparent and then my kids and then my grandkids. So several different layers there of the sandwich that I'm having to deal with. And then we talked about the emptiness thing is just the grieving process that takes place. And that can hit people really hard if you have a close relationship with your young adult and they leave. There's some sadness there and sometimes can be some depression. It's really important that parents focus on self-care at this point in time, taking care of their health, building out friends and building out your social network, protecting your marriage, establishing boundaries, getting help from extended family and professional help. So those are all important in dealing with the young adult and in the process of letting go of the young adult too. So we talk about putting your mask on first and then putting your son or daughter's mask on. So letting go is a necessary act of love because we can't control our children, can't be responsible. We must do this in order to facilitate their development. They are wired to go. They are wired to build their own families. And because we will continue to suffer unnecessarily if we don't let go. And both of us, parents and young adults, have to manage the letting go dance. And it's hard because sometimes the young adult comes to us and wants help and we may move in to be helpful and then they may push back away and say, I don't want your advice. I can do this on my own. So it's always a little bit of, it's trying to manage that dynamic of support and saying no and letting go. And that's always a little tricky to do. And it's a loving act. So what does it mean to let go? Let go of a dependent living situation? Um, I make the argument that I think a young adult can be responsibly independent and living at home, and the parents can be fully separated and detached at the same time as a young adult is living at home. It's not the issue is not whether they're living at home or not, but whether they have addressed the issues of identity, independence, intimacy, intention. And if they're doing that and they're fully participating in the family and helping out in the family, I don't find that to be a problem. Sometimes our society tends to look at that as, oh, your son is still living at home at such and such an age. I was going to look this up, but I didn't. But I think a fairly large percentage of the world have living arrangements that are 3 generational. So we're maybe a little unusual in booting in ejecting our young adults at a certain age. Let go of control, let go of binding emotions, let go of our responsibility, let go of our dreams. That's hard because it's enough to let go of our kids and let them be on their own. But from very early on, we have visions about what we want our kids to do, who we want them to be, and what we want them to do. And strangely enough, they don't always fulfill those dreams or those visions that we have. And we have to be willing. Part of the letting go is letting go of those dreams that are our dreams, not their dreams. So letting go, but staying loving, and letting go of the past and saying goodbye. So I'm going to end it with some good news. The relationships between young adults and parents improve over time. That's just the research that's been done. It just gets better. So I want you to be hopeful. If you're in a situation where it's quite uncomfortable and contentious, it gets better. For the majority of parents and young adults, it gets better. On average, emerging young adults take 5 to 10 years longer to transition to living in their own homes compared to the baby boomer parents. They commit to relationships and aspire to traditional goals such as marriage, children, home ownership. So they're not unlike us. It's just that they're taking more time to do that, to reach those particular goals. This term, majority of emerging adults, that's a new term that has been coined to describe this stage of development between adolescence and full adulthood. So it's typically 18 to 34 is described as a new stage called emerging adulthood. And in the past, we went pretty quickly from adolescence into adulthood, got married young, got jobs, and went right into it. Now we're extending that period of experimentation and exploration, which I think is a good thing, and allow these kids to explore their options and their opportunities. I think one of the things that we end up doing as parents is we use the template of our own experience and maybe how our parents treated us to look at our kids. And that's not fair to them because they're a different breed right now. This is a different generation, and they're taking more time to get settled, and that's okay. So they find satisfying work by the late 20s, sometimes into the early 30s. They tend to change jobs every 2 years. They like work-life balance. I was telling, talking to one friend of mine who owns a business, and they said, yeah, these young adults, these millennials, like work-life balance. They're the first generation ever where work ethic is not in the top 5 values. But they like to work, but they want balance in that. And he was saying to me, yeah, he said, I hired this girl and she came in the first week and said, now said to me, the boss, now I just want you to know from 1:30 to 2:30, I'm going to be going to my yoga class. But I just wanted to let you know that. Hey, he just looked at her. Now, can you imagine saying that 30 years ago to your boss? I'm going to my yoga class from 1 to 2:30. Now she said, I'll stay longer. I'll work longer that day, but I got my yoga class at that time. So no adolescent or young adult I've worked with, when asked where he or she wanted to be 5 years from now, ever said, I just want to be living with mommy and daddy. I said that earlier. So that's good news. If you have somebody living at home and you're wondering, will they ever leave? They don't want to be there either. They will leave. So, okay. I'm going to see if I get back here, stop the sharing, screen sharing. And I'm also going to stop the recording.